Oops. Okay. What's going on, everyone? Thank you all for tuning in. Sorry I'm a little late. I actually am still scrambling to get set up here. Coming back from a date, in case you're wondering. So I'm just scrambling a little bit here. So I'm going to pull up the questions while I'm at it. Let's see, where did I put the questions here? Script. Okay, but typical stuff for those of you who are new to tuning in. These are the weekly live streams. I'm doing a little later today just because I was out, but 30-minute live streams every Wednesdays, 8:30 to 9 o'clock, where I answer your questions. Don't forget, if you have questions that you want to leave me for future live streams, just use the Google form below to enter those in, and I'm gonna always address those first. So make sure you do that. And if you all have questions in general, you just want to interact, always feel free to leave them in the live chat, and I will definitely get to them as well. Which, by the way, if you are one of those viewers on the live chat, thanks for tuning in. Make sure you give the video a like if you haven't already. And I'm trying to figure out ways to engage with you all more. But if you could, and you feel comfortable, leave your name and kind of where you're from, and maybe just something about yourself, so I can kind of get to know you as well. So feel free to do that in the live chat. Trying to get to know some of my audience just a little bit more. Okay, so I think I have the sheet pulled up. All right. Let me just double check here. Where did we leave off? Okay, here it is. So let's start off with questions. Let's see. The first question here is about pharmacy. It is from Kai, who is from the Midwest. And how many questions do we have here? So the question is, do you have any advice for an applicant who is participating in phase 2 into Sarasota in particular? I imagine that's Sarasota Memorial, which, fun fact, I did my PGY1 at Sarasota, and that's actually where I scrambled to in my PGY1 as well. So I imagine this is probably a pretty common question for a lot of folks out there who's participating. Any advice for applicants who are participating in phase 2? I've made a couple of videos about phase 2, probably better summarized there. But let me see, off the top of my head, phase 2. I think I'll make a couple of general points. Phase 2 is hard. It's extremely hard. That's the first thing I'll say. I think when I was going through the scramble, it was like 1,500 something unmatched applicants for 150 spots. So if you paint that picture, the first thing I would say is like it's a numbers game, and it's about applying to as many programs as you can, because again, it's a numbers game. I imagine the numbers are much worse, and it's been getting worse each year as there's more and more unmatched students. But so the first thing is just apply to as many programs as feasibly possible, because it gets very expensive for each program that you apply to. I think I spent probably like $250 applying to maybe, how many programs? I think I applied to maybe like 15 or 20 programs. But again, if you really want that residency, it's kind of rough. Just apply to as many as you can. The second thing I would say is that a lot of phase 2, at least more so back in the day, but probably somewhat same, is that a lot of phase 2 is, I don't think it's very fair. There's a lot of internal lists in the phase 2 or even post phase 2 in the scramble, where, a lot of these programs that you apply to, most programs don't actually even know who you are. Like this random person that's applying for programs, they've never heard of you, but you're just trying to get a program. So a lot of people don't know who you are. And what happens is that it comes down to word of mouth. So if you apply to a program and you have had no interaction with them, the chance of you landing an interview with them is very slim to none. So what I would say in that sense is that really leverage your connections. Whether it's a preceptor, a mentor, a colleague or something, definitely mention something to them to see if there's some type of word of mouth that could occur to get you one step closer, because it's really difficult in that sense. Other than that, I'm not sure there's too many other things. I think being open-minded maybe is another one. It's okay somewhat to be picky in phase 1, but it's very difficult to be picky in phase 2, just because the competition is so high. So I would apply to programs that you may have weeded out in phase 1. Granted, programs that you still wanted to attend. You don't want to apply to a program that you're not interested in at all. So I think that's the other thing. Just best of luck. I have a playlist on some of my thoughts that are probably more clearly articulated in those videos. I would encourage you to check those out. I probably do a better job of articulating my thoughts there. And I'm just posting another link. I'm a little behind on everything right there. Yeah. So that's the first question. Maybe I'll just leave it at that. Go watch some of my videos where I talk about phase 2 specifically. There's a lot of great resources out there, by the way, too, about phase 2. People commenting on how they navigated it, especially ASHP. I think there's a collection of students that have posted their experiences on there. And then to Sarasota in particular is your second question. I don't think there's anything specific about Sarasota or how I would approach it any different than other programs. A lot of people will test you on the similar things, where there's usually a phone screening sometimes, followed by an in-person interview. There's not much of a difference, because they're going to ask you the same questions as they did in phase 1, where you need to make sure you're brushed up on your clinical content. You need to be prepared for situational / behavioral type questions. So there's nothing specifically I would say in Sarasota in particular. But if you do end up applying there, which I'm assuming you probably are, and you get an interview, say hi to everyone there for me, because the people in Sarasota are super awesome. Okay, that's that question. Let's move on to the next question. This one is from Jeffrey, who is in New York City. And the question is about pharmacy, MPH, or public health in general. So it looks like there's a couple. Wow, there's a lot of questions. Okay, let's start from the first question here. So Jeffrey says, "Hey Brian, I am a pharmacist from New York City who recently applied to the Johns Hopkins online part-time program." Good choice, by the way. I just wanted to see if you could help answer some of the questions that I have regarding the program and public health itself. So let's see. First question is, are there any core classes that you really enjoyed and would recommend? Let's see. 1 second here. Any core classes that I would enjoy? Copy and paste this. So for those who are not familiar with the Hopkins program or are interested in the public health program at Hopkins, I'm not being biased by any means, but it is truly an awesome program. Hopkins program is 80 credits in total, which is double the amount of credits other public health programs have. 40 of them are required and 40 of them are electives. So this is, I'm assuming maybe you're talking about elective credits, because whether or not I recommend a core class or not, you still have to take it. So I'm assuming you're maybe referring to electives as well, but I'll comment on both. So core classes, I would say there's quite a few core classes in the public health program that I really, really enjoyed. The first of which is probably problem solving in public health, which is the very first class everyone takes at orientation. And I think this is fantastic, even if you're not interested in public health and you're in pharmacy or any other industry. I think what I appreciated about that class is because it gives you a framework by which you can solve problems of any kind. And it's something I use quite often in my own personal life. First step is like defining the problem, defining a time period, being very specific, figuring out the magnitude of it, like how big is the problem, what are the things that contribute to it, and then ultimately coming up with a set of recommendations. And I thought that class did a great job of systematically teaching you how to solve really complex and large problems. So that's one of the classes I enjoyed. Another class I really enjoyed is probably population dynamics, which talks about how population shifts. We in pharmacy we think about like numerators and denominators, but in population dynamics, they talk about how that moves. When there's people that die, you lose a little bit of the denominator, right? Or when there's people that migrate to another country, you lose people in both categories. But essentially, it really teaches you how to think about epidemiology that's moving. I don't know if I'm doing a good job of explaining it, but I thought it was the most fascinating thing ever because it taught you how to compare different statistics across countries. Like how to examine the death rate or mortality rate of infants between the US and Egypt, or compare the length of time people live for in different countries. And it was just the most fascinating thing ever. And how do you compare countries on these very broad markers? I thought that was very fantastic. What are the core classes that we have to take? Maybe I'll just move on from there. Those are like two very common ones that I can think about off the top of my head. One elective that I really enjoyed was persuasive communication. So in public health, it's very common, as I'm sure many of those out there right now can tell. Communication to the public is very important. How you communicate can dictate a lot of different things. So that course taught you how to persuade the general public in doing certain interventions, like should I or should I not get a vaccine? Should I or should I not quit smoking? How to create messages or craft messages in a way that is persuasive to the general public. So that was super fascinating, of course. Probably one of my favorite. And then the other one is probably, as for elective, knowledge engineering and clinical decision support. And I'm not going to do a good job of explaining this one, but essentially it's how do you create a framework that allows you to compute on healthcare information. You create the the database by which you exchange information and things like that. I'm not going to do a good job of explaining it, but it was just fascinating because it taught you a lot about ontologies. How do you represent information in a way that's structured and computable? So that was the elective that I really enjoyed. And maybe we'll just stop it there. All right, let's see. Next question here. I'm very interested in infectious diseases. Any ID courses that you would recommend at Hopkins? So you're required to take one biology course. If you're not a health professional major or you have no health background, there's only like, I think 1 or 2 classes that you can take, like a very basic one. And I figured I'd opted for a more advanced course, and I took sexually transmitted infections. That was pretty fascinating. I don't know if I would recommend it. It was just fascinating. I learned a lot. But yeah, I don't have any particular ID courses that I would recommend. That was the only one that I took, so I probably can't speak too much to it. They have a lot of fascinating infectious disease courses, but that wasn't my focus. So probably none that I would necessarily recommend. I'm sure they're all awesome though. Let's see. Let's move on to the next question. Is it hard to get accepted into Delta Omega Honor Society? So I think that might be a subjective and relative question to yourself. I did get the invitation to apply, but I feel as though in master's programs, my own bias, that it's not hard to do well in school. I think it's very easy to, if anything, get straight A's throughout a master's program of any kind. With that said, I know some of my classmates struggled. It's just a lot, especially those of us that work full time and did this part time. It's very, very difficult to juggle two things at once. So is it hard? I didn't think so. I think it was like the top 20% of your class. And I feel as though everyone will end up getting straight A's. I didn't get straight A's. Ironic, even though I'm saying this right now. But I did get all A's throughout my 2.5 years there. 2.5 years there, except 1B. But in general, I think it's fairly easy to get accepted. But I didn't ultimately apply. All right, next question. I want to step into the field of public health, but don't want to give up on pharmacy completely. Are there any jobs or occupations that are a good blend of the two fields? You know what's funny? I get this question a lot about people who are like, why did you do a public health degree? What are the job opportunities of pharmacy and public health? To be honest, my pursuit of public health had nothing to do with pharmacy. I just really loved public health. I thought it was fascinating. And I love public health because of the exposure I got to antimicrobial stewardship. So the funny thing about the question is that I actually don't know of all the opportunities available to pharmacists who also do a public health degree. I know of some, but I'm not a great person to ask because I didn't do it to look for job opportunities that blended to. I did it because I just wanted to do public health. With that said, my assumption is plenty of jobs that blend public health and pharmacy together. I think the first thing that comes to mind is things like the FDA, the CDC. There's another government organization I was trying to think of. But any organization that does health, what's that HEOR stand for again? Health, Economics, and Outcomes Research. That is done quite often in government agencies. You're looking at research that involve medications to some extent, the costs to manufacture it, research development, the cost-benefit analysis of certain treatments. A lot of that is done in government agencies, and I think it's a fantastic use of your pharmacy background and a public health background. And so many of the positions I'm aware of typically are in government, nonprofits, probably some think tanks that blend the two. Are there anything else that comes to mind? I think that's the main thing. Government type work, public health agencies, nonprofits, think tanks, probably some academia. There's some pharmacists who are professors and they have their MPHs and they teach public health related courses. But those are probably the ones that I think about most. And then whether or not you like those career tracks, it's kind of dependent. I enjoy it. I think it's fascinating though. Okay, so that's the last question on this one. Let us flip over. I wonder how long. Let me see how long I've been actually streaming, because I'm trying to do it 30 minutes. Let's see. So I have been streaming for 20 minutes. Okay, so do a couple more questions here. Let's see. So we have a question. Next one is about informatics. So I don't know who sent this one. This person says, I follow your vlogs religiously. Thank you, by the way. And you have made a huge difference in the life of many pharmacy students. I actually sincerely appreciate that. That's a very nice compliment. I will be applying for residency this year. My question is, after implementing Epic or Cerner, do these hospital systems just fire the informatics pharmacists? If not, what role do informatics pharmacists have after the new EHR has been fully implemented? Let's say if you were a fresh graduate right now, which route would you pursue now that you have so much experience and knowledge? And would you go the informatics route all over again? There's actually a lot of questions in this one. Okay, so let's answer this one. The chat is very quiet today. If you guys who are watching the live stream, if you have a question, definitely leave it in the chat. Otherwise, this question is probably going to take up the rest of the 9 minutes that I'm going to stream for. But let's take a stab at it. So the first question here was, does the hospital system just fire the informatics pharmacists after implementation? So the short answer is no. And the reason why is because, let me think about an analogy here. The thing I'm trying to say is that there's a big maintenance component to it. Let's see. What's a good example I can think of? So if you bought a brand new car, right? You bought the car. No, that's not a great one to give an example of. Let me think about another one. Actually, we'll just stick to it because otherwise I'm going to ramble on for a while. Essentially, that new car you buy has to undergo maintenance, right, at frequent intervals, to make sure it's working well. And then sometimes there's upgrades to it, especially if you have one of the new cars nowadays that have computer systems that are wired to it. They do updates every now and then. So it's very similar in the EHR system, where just because you have it running doesn't mean like that's it. You need someone to maintain it. Things don't always go as planned, so you have issues that occur. And so you need those informatics people who built the system to fix issues that occur. That's one thing. But then there's also like updates. New drugs come out all the time. Guidelines get updated all the time. You have new functionality that come out. It doesn't just magically appear. You need someone to actually build it into the system. Epic and Cerner doesn't build it for you. They provide the ability for individual organizations to build it. So just because one Epic site has it doesn't mean all Epic sites have it. That individual site needs to decide, hey, this is a cool functionality. Our informatics pharmacist is going to help us implement that. So they definitely don't fire them. If anything, and strangely enough, the workforce may even increase afterwards because you need people to maintain the system. Maintenance is probably one of the most overlooked things when implementing systems. It's a huge component. A lot of work goes into maintaining these systems once they're built. So that's your first part of the question. Let's see the next one. If not, what role do informatics pharmacists have after the new EHR has been fully implemented? So I kind of answered that already. You essentially maintain the system, like the existing system, to make sure it works as expected. But the other type role that you have is that you make sure you build new things into the system as guidelines get updated, new drugs come out, things like that. So there's maintenance and then there's optimization. The next question is the fresh graduate part. Which route would you pursue now that you have so much experience and knowledge? So relatively speaking, I wouldn't even say that I have a lot of experience and knowledge. I'm still a relatively new grad, if anything. Because I finished my residency in 2015. So I've only had, less than 6 years of experience. That's really still relatively young in the field, I would say. I like to think that's relatively young. So let's see. Would I go the informatics route again? I think there's usually not an absolute, so I'll say 99.9% yes. And it didn't even matter if I did pharmacy, if I did medical, the medical routes or any other health profession route, I would definitely go the informatics route again. I probably, because I've always loved technology, I loved being a little bit more technical, I love just speaking the language of computers. So I think yes to the informatics route. And it's the idea of, I'm more of a utilitarian person. I like to, I think it makes sense if you want to help people that you help as many people as possible. And I think informatics is one of the easiest pathways to do that. The things you do impact every user of the system, which ultimately impact all the patients that they take care of. So I think informatics is a huge variable in in good patient care, and I think that's so rewarding. So informatics, yes. Now, if you're asking about if I would pursue, because you're saying if I would pursue, what would I pursue now, knowing everything I know now? Maybe you're not talking about pharmacy at all. I think if I were to say, if you want to go that route, I would probably not pursue healthcare. I was originally a computer engineer / programmer, and I think that I just love engineering so much that if I were to do everything all over again, I would probably have gone back to my roots and continued on the pathway of a computer engineer or a software engineer for that matter, because that is like the thing to do nowadays. Come out with a computer science degree, go work for like one of the FANG companies like Facebook, Amazon, Apple. Oh, you're set. You do your career is gonna skyrocket if you took one of those routes. So if I were to do it all again, I would probably do something like that. Now, if money wasn't the issue, and I answer this question quite often, but I don't know if I've ever answered it on Livestream. If money wasn't an issue, what would I do? There's 3 things, and maybe this is just more information than you want to know. The first thing is I would love to be a motivational speaker. I think there's something to be said and a feeling that I get that I really enjoy when the words you say can inspire other people. And I've always loved that. And I think I got that impression when I used to do presentations in pharmacy school. It was just really cool when you can command a room, speak on a topic, and get someone interested in a topic or make them motivated to do something different. So motivational speaker was definitely one of them. A second one would be a professional dancer. I don't know if you guys know that, but I enjoy dancing quite a bit, all types of dancing. Break dancing, ballroom dancing. I've done ballet before, modern dancing. So dancing is something I enjoy quite a bit. So professional dancer would be a second one. And then the third one is stand-up comedian. I enjoy making people laugh. I'm not very successful at it, but I enjoy making people laugh. Smiling is contagious. It's a positive vibe, so I really enjoy that. So those would be the things that I would do if money wasn't an issue. So I think that was the last part of the question. Yeah, that was the last part of the question. And I think that is time. Yep, we're right about at 30 minutes. We didn't get any live chat questions today. I'm kind of sad. I'm very sad, and I'm sorry. I kind of ran off the usual course. Usually, I do this at 8:30, and I was like an hour-ish behind. But for those who are tuning in, thank you for tuning in at the last minute. Don't forget to give the video a like. I'm actually gonna peace out now because I've hit the 30-minute mark. But thank you guys always for supporting. If you have questions in the future, leave them in the use the Google form to answer the questions, to leave your questions for me, and I'll answer them in the next one. But thank you guys for joining, and I will see you all next week. Bye.